Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Happy Monday. I hope that you all are just as excited as I am to get started with today's chat and learn. In case you've never joined us for a chat and learn before, or maybe it's been a while since you joined us, welcome. If you are one of our newest community members, we are so happy to have you join us today. If you are a frequent flyer with us and we see you all the time, welcome back. It's so nice to see everybody. This is going to be, our chat and learn is going to kick off here in just a second. But before we do that, I want to go over some quick housekeeping. So in case you haven't met me or haven't been back in a while, my name's Meg. I am part of Power to Fly's hosting team. Now, one thing to know about today's session, like all of our virtual events, this is all about you. It's about our community members, and we want to make sure that you all are as able to participate as you would like to. So if you have questions during the session and you want to ask them, please feel free. You can always type them into the group chat on Zoom. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, but you want to be kept anonymous, no worries. All you have to do is DM it to me instead of sending it to the entire group in that group chat. Now, if you do have any questions or comments for the speakers, again, please feel free to share those. I'll be in there trying to grab questions for the speaker as much as we can. So please feel free to take advantage of, the fact that you all came here to be live. We want to make sure that that is that participation is an open option for all of you. Now, if you have any kind of privacy concerns or anything, totally understand. If you want to turn your cameras on and share your smiling maskless faces with us safely, that is great. If you have privacy concerns, just know that as long as you don't come off mute during the session, you will not show up on the live recording. The recording or the live stream. So just so y'all are aware of that. Like I said, if you do have questions or comments, please feel free to share them in the chat. You can also connect with each other. Maybe you have a different lived experience to one of the questions that we're talking about. So please feel free to share there. Now, like I said, today's session is being recorded. So what this means for all of you is that you don't have to worry about taking notes. You don't have to be, you don't have to message out and be all worried if you missed the resource that someone talked about, or if you got the 3 out of the 5 items on the quick tips list that we're going to talk about. Do not stress. You can always go back and rewatch this recording later. Now, everybody that registered today is going to get an email in about 1 to 2 business days from Power to Fly. It's going to have a link to where you can rewatch this recording on our website once it's posted there. Now, you can also, let's say that, Marcella says something amazing today and you just mind blown, cannot wait to share it with a coworker or a relative or a friend. You don't have to wait the 1 to 2 business days. You can always head over to our YouTube channel. I'll share the links for all of this with y'all in the chat thread in just a moment. You can head over to our YouTube channel, and from there, you'll be able to watch a huge segment of our video archive. The live stream is usually posted to that channel within about 5 to 15 minutes of the end. So, you can always enjoy all that good stuff there. I also recommend that you follow us. Follow us on the YouTube channel. It's a great way to make sure you don't miss out on chats. You can also check us out on our other social media channels. We are at Power to Fly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, as well as YouTube. Please feel free to take photos or video as we go. Feel free to share out to your social network that you are learning and growing with Power to Fly. Anything we can do to get these resources, these free resources, in the hands of as many people as possible, this is what we strive to do. So the more the merrier, the more people we can bring into the Power to Fly community, the better. Now, our guest today is here on behalf of Okta. Now, we use them for all kinds of stuff, 2-factor authentication for all of our internal security. You may or may not be familiar with them, but one thing I want to highlight, and I'll share the links again, I'll share these links with y'all in the chat thread in just a little bit. This is what Okta's company page looks like on powertofly.com. Now, if you go there, you can check out all kinds of great stuff. You can check out the about, that'll give you more information on the Okta company culture. You can check out events, that's going to have recordings to events like today that Okta has partnered on with us, as well as links to where you can register for future events with them, as well as obviously their open jobs. So you can also search those directly from our platform. Now, if something that you hear today, pricks your ears up or grabs your attention, something that makes you think that Okta might be a great place for you to go to work. One thing I recommend, obviously check out their open roles, but if you are either not actively seeking right now, just kind of, keeping your options open, or if you are actively seeking, but maybe don't see anything on Okta's open roles that really applies to you just yet, then what I recommend is at the top right-hand corner of this company page, there's going to be a big button that says follow. It's in pink, it's got white letters on it. Clicking that does a couple great things for you, but effectively it works like your friend at Okta. So it's going to let Okta know that you are interested in working with them even before you fill out an application, but it's also going to keep Okta on your radar by letting you know when they post new roles. So it's a great way to make sure that you stay up to date, you don't miss out on a new job posting that might be a really great fit for you, but you don't have to keep coming back and checking and rechecking job boards that seemingly never change until, you miss a day and suddenly there's 1,000 new jobs. So definitely take advantage of those features. Now, I'm very excited to introduce you to today's speaker. So Marcella Norris is an experienced software sales representative who has worked at pre-IPO and public companies, including Datadog, Apple, Rapid7, and Okta. So Marcella focuses on building customer relationships, maintaining a strong brand, and scaling successful, repeatable sales processes. Now, Marcella and I got a chance to speak earlier before we opened up the waiting room for today's session, and she shared with me some stuff about her background. So Marcella, I want you to share this with our audience so that way they have a better understanding of like who you are and the myriad of topics that this kind of opens up for us within the chat today.
Sure. Thank you so much for the intro, Meg. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I see some familiar names and some unfamiliar names. A couple of things I would say that are not listed on this page. It's been a few years since the last time I did a networking speaking engagement like this, but I have spoken with Out in Tech here in Boston, as well as WISE, which I think is Women in Sales Everywhere is what it stands for. So if you have any questions about what it's like to be a woman in sales, selling specifically to the tough engineers and DevOps and security people in the world, or what it's like to be comfortable in your own skin at whatever company you're at, I'm happy to field those questions as well. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Marcella. That transparency is very, very appreciated. And thank you so much for being vulnerable with us. All right, so before we dive into questions today, I just want to talk about some of the main takeaways you can expect from today's event. Now, just keep in mind that we identified these based on both conversations with Marcella, as well as by looking and checking out the questions that you had all submitted when you registered. So all of this to say that these are the areas we're going to try and cover today, but you took time to, out of your day to be here with us. And we really appreciate that. We know that there are a ton of options for where you can get free resources like this and great information, but we're very happy and grateful that you came to spend time with us. So if you have a question, if you want to dive in deeper on something that Marcella is talking about, ask us in the chat. If you, if you submitted a question, but you're not sure if we're going to have time to get to it today, ask us in the chat. All right. We want to know what you want to know. I want to make sure that we make this event impactful and valuable to all of you. So please feel free, ask early, ask often. I want to make sure that we get y'all all the great information that you came here to get from Marcella. So I'm going to stop my screen share here, and we're going to dive in on some of these questions. So let's see here. I'm going to add a spotlight. There we go. So I want to talk a little bit about, to start us off with at least, the kind of growth opportunities that exist within the sales industry. So if this is not, a situation or an industry that you've been in before, Marcella, from your experience, what does growth look like? What kind of options are out there?
I have a follow-up question to that. Typical sales rep thing is to ask more questions. So I guess that sounds like a two-part question. One, are you asking how to get into the sales industry, or where you can go from being in sales after being in it for a little bit?
It looks like where you can go.
Okay.
It doesn't look like, and if this is your question and you've got, extra context for us, please feel free to share in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on that the whole time. But yeah, let's come at it from a perspective of you're already in the industry and now you're trying to figure out like, where do I go from here?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think that the standard answer would be you either go to leadership or you go into enterprise as an individual contributor. I like to challenge that answer a little bit and see what people actually care about, what industries they're most interested in, and what you like about sales. For me personally, things that I like about being in sales include talking to people. I'm super chatty, learning about other people, trends in the industry, just tech in general. And that's kind of how I got into sales anyway. My first job was as a sales expert at Apple. And I only started working at Apple because I loved Apple products. I loved their customer experience. And that's how I got into tech sales. And now I've kind of gotten addicted to meeting new people and learning about what they're interested in. So I think that you kind of have to follow like what you personally are interested in. So I've had a lot of friends make a pivot from sales into marketing because they like the graphic design piece, they like the outreach piece, they like the events piece. And I've had others go into engineering. Like sales engineering is a really great way to pivot into the engineering world without needing to go to college or get your master's degree in software engineering. It's very possible to kind of teach yourself what you're most interested in. So some of my personal sales engineers that I've worked with in the past have a sales background, and they were like, you know what, I like the product, I like developing, I want to go into engineering, but like, how do I bridge that gap from having a sales background into engineering? Sales engineering is an excellent way to go. So yeah, if you want to go into enterprise sales, sales management, marketing, events marketing, sales engineering, solutions engineering, if you want to go into development, there are some companies that like will help you learn more about that specifically and make that pivot. Then absolutely, you can totally do that. It just really depends on what parts of sales do you currently like and where can you marry those interests with where you want to go to next. Oh, I think
there we go. Sorry, that was on me. I couldn't find my mute button for a second.
Yeah, not a super traditional answer, but it's, you know, it is possible. Just be like super resourceful and you can go from there.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And if this was your question and you want to give us more context, please feel free. If you are already, part of the sales industry and you have seen different opportunities be available, please feel free. Let us know. Let us know in the chat there. I'm putting together a poll here so we can kind of get an idea of where everybody is in their sales journey. If you're trying to pivot in, if you're, fresh, like, 0 to 3 years in, or if you like upwards of 5. So I'll send out that poll here in just a moment. So that way we can kind of get an idea where y'all are coming from here. All right. One of the other questions that we got asked a lot had to do with mentorship. A lot of people wanted to know if a mentor really has an impact in a sales career or not. So let's talk about that, and then we'll dive a little bit more into, maybe how to find a mentor.
Okay, yeah. So first question is, how can a mentor impact your career in sales, right? I would say that if it wasn't for some of the mentors that I have in my network for different categories, I wouldn't be where I am today. Like, to be super transparent with you guys, I'm 28 years old. I own my own house now, and I have a dog and a car, and I have had different mentors for different areas of my life. And I ask a lot of questions. So I think if you talk to a bunch of people in your life already and you kind of share with them what your goals are, or maybe like what your passion is and how you want to move up, these people will naturally gravitate towards you and help answer those questions as if it was like not even like a serious mentorship. Like, I almost feel like I accidentally like hired my mentors and I like forced them to be my mentors, because I kept following up with them and being like, hey, you told me to say this in my next interview. What do I say to their follow-up question? Or, hey, you told me to network with this group of people. What do I do once I'm in this group of people? How do I present myself in front of C-level execs that I've never met before? If you keep asking those questions to the right people, then those people will kind of gravitate towards you and help guide you towards the direction you want to go to. But also, like, the people who see potential in you will very naturally like coach that potential without you even knowing. I've been super lucky to have like a number of sales managers kind of know early on in my career that I was good at sales and that I should go towards sales instead of something else. And I pushed against it. I was like, I don't want to be in sales. Like, I think I want to go into like software engineering. And I had two specific managers at Apple actually tell me like, no, like you're top of the leaderboard and you don't even talk about sales stuff. Like you should go do this. So I've been tapped on the shoulder multiple times by people who I didn't realize were my mentor. But at the end of the day, they ended up like, now I'm like, oh yeah, for sure. Like Tom McAvoy was a mentor of mine, like Ali Live, mentor of mine, even though like they didn't even know it. I didn't know it at the time, but I look back and I'm like, okay, these are people who answered my questions, who guided me in the right direction, and who really like pushed me to be a better version of myself that I didn't even know like existed. So I think it's one part luck, and another part, you know, it's a back and forth. It's a two-way street of like, they give you an answer, you act on that answer, then you follow up on that and you keep on going. And if you keep on going, then I think that might answer another question that I saw too, of like, how can you find a mentor in the sales world? It happens a little bit naturally, where you just find somebody that they answer your questions really well and they keep pushing you really hard. So it's pretty great. And a lot of people want to help other people too. So yes,
absolutely. All right. So before we move on to our next question, I just want to see, can you expand a little bit on what you're saying about like, they might not even realize that they are a mentor for you? I feel like when we talk about mentorship, especially the last several chats that I've hosted on it, a lot of effort and a lot of like worry from people comes from the idea of like, how do you broach this? Like, is this a formal, like people kind of build it up in their minds, right? Of saying that like, you have to have this weird formal conversation of like, will you be my mentor? And like, you have to ask it in the right way and all of this stuff. And you, I mean, at least from what you're telling us, it sounds like it's actually a lot easier than we would think, right?
Yeah, I think we should take away the formality of the mentorship conversation, and just be a human being. And again, like if you're asking a question to somebody and they give you an answer, act on the answer and then follow up. That's what I really like from my mentees is they do what I tell them, what I recommend for them to do, and then they follow up on it and they keep on pushing back on me. And I think that's kind of like relationship 101 with anybody, is there's a back and forth, there's follow-up, there's questioning, healthy questioning, you know, like I've had mentors tell me like, hey, I think you should take this route. And I've said, I don't like that route. How about I take this one? And we kind of negotiate back and forth. So it's all about the follow-up. Like if you follow up with someone, if you follow up with me, like I'll answer your question. So, but being graceful in that, really shows the natural mentors out in the world. Like you'll find them, you'll find the people who want to help you if you follow up with them.
I think that's a really good point, you know, because like you said, you know, getting that advice and taking the advice and then following up, at least for me, I always had like a really weird feeling when like I wasn't able to follow their advice exactly, or something happened and then it changed. And so then I was, you know, something happened, the situation changes, and now I've kind of got to make a different choice because I can't keep going back to one person of like, well, people, what do I do now? What do I do now? And so I like how you said, you know, it is kind of that give and take, right? They want to give you advice and you want to be helped. But yeah, I like that idea of kind of recognizing that like, you're not just a drone, right? This isn't just like, well, they said to do this, so I got to do it. Especially if you're working with people either outside your organization, or people that maybe are not in that same department anymore. You know, it can feel weird, right? It can feel like, well, if I don't do exactly what they told me, then they're not going to want to be my mentor. And so I very much like what you said, you know, both about that kind of give and take, but also that idea that like, a lot of the reason it doesn't need to be this formal is because like, you don't need just one mentor, right? You don't have like your sensei and that's the only person you go talk to about these things, right? You know, It sounded like from what you were talking about, you've got certain people that you go to with certain, certain areas of, of your career. Mm-hmm. Is that accurate?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Getting multiple perspectives is always super helpful in regardless of whether it's like sales, career, personal goals, anything like that. The more questions you ask of different people, the more answers you'll get. And just like, mush it all together in your brain and figure out your own plan. So
yes. Oof, love that. All right. So part of, once we kind of get into that topic of mentorship, the next thing that usually comes along with that is networking, right? And so you have to like expand your network and solidify your professional contacts, all that kind of stuff. Do you have a go-to strategy or something that is, kind of top of mind, or a step that you always take when you are trying to expand your network?
That's a question that I get all the time, and I don't really have a good answer to it. That's a tough question. I think that so I'm gonna start off with networking within your company. As a sales rep, I interface with legal, security, customer success, solutions engineering, business development, marketing, events marketing. I interface with a lot of different people. The way that I've built my relationships at Okta and every company that I've worked with or worked at in the past is making sure that I know how they succeed in their role, what their KPIs are, what they're driven by, and like if they're looking for positive feedback, if they're looking for constructive feedback, anything that I can do to help them succeed in their specific role, I'm going to do it. And for my role specifically as a field account executive at Okta, we have to open opportunities. We work with marketing, SDRs, channel partners. Whenever I get help from one of those specific business units within Okta, I make sure that they get credit on the opportunity, especially for when it closes. I give them credit when it closes. So taking that perspective of making sure you take care of the people around you and the people that are helping you, figure out what their KPIs are, figure out what success looks like for them, giving that to them is a really easy way for a win-win situation, because then we both look good, we both succeed. We can be super upfront and honest and be like, hey, like I need this from you. If you give this to me, then like I'll do anything for you in the future. I kind of have that type of relationship with my business counterparts at Okta. So taking that outside of Okta though, similar situation, I'm a big fan of like paying it forward. I recently, actually last week, had one of my close friends' cousins who just graduated from college reach out to me out of nowhere and say, hey, I want to get into tech sales. What do I do? And I sent him a bunch of materials and he got a job within 2 weeks of using my materials. And I was so incredibly proud. He didn't get a job at Okta. I didn't get a referral bonus, but it was one of those moments where it's kind of like, if you can help people be successful in whatever way they're looking to be successful, then like they'll pay it forward too. And if they don't pay it forward, you're still like, paying it forward somewhere. You're like, it'll boomerang back somehow. So really understanding what the person in front of you cares about, is interested in, wants to do. If I have like any intel on that, I'll give it to them. It's no skin off my back, which is one of the reasons why I'm like doing this fun Q&A thing too, is like, I hope to answer some questions to help people that have these questions top of mind. But yeah, I think that's all I really know about networking is figure out how the person in front of you is measured on success or what they want to do, and try to provide whatever you may know or whatever you can do to them to the best of your ability.
Yeah, I think that's definitely where the conversation inevitably leads, right? Is this idea of like, how do you foster that relationship? How do you grow it?
Yeah.
And I like how you kind of came at it from the perspective of, treating it like a two-way street. Of like, okay, I know that this person, values this or has needed this from me in the past. And so, how can I provide that? I especially love this, what you talked about of like calling out when people have helped you to like close a deal. Because like, not only are you, like you said, giving recognition to those people, but you're also setting a really good precedent, which is like, if you work with Marcella, she is not going to take all the credit for and pretending like we do this, in a vacuum. And so it is a really great way to not only like model behavior that you'd like to see spread to those around you, but like do it in a way that is incredibly positive and pretty hard to throw, to like poke holes in, because, everybody wants to know that they did a good job. Everybody wants to know like if something they did was helpful. So I think that's lovely. I love this. We did have a lot of questions that people were like asking around like ways to network and ways to find people. I actually heard something really great on this, but before we touch on that, I want to listen to you, Marcella. Like, do you think there are certain areas or certain like activities that are best for networking, especially outside your own org?
Ooh. It's hard in the COVID world now, because we have so many, like, we have a lot of gates that we have to get past. Pre-COVID, my answer would have been, go to as many events as you can, that are in your area specifically. Like, people love like the hometown events, like people love Boston events or security events, whatever it may be. But now that we're in a world where people prefer to meet over Zoom, it's almost like I'm playing telephone now, where it's like, hey, I know this person, you know this person, how do you know this person, and how can we work together? So I would say, like, anybody that's worked, so on LinkedIn, for example, anybody that's worked at a company that you've worked at previously, that's kind of an automatic in, and you can be like, hey, I saw you're an Apple alumni, would love to connect, blah, blah, blah. Or somebody that went to a school that you went to, or maybe even somebody that like has the same role as you at another company, but you want to learn a little bit more about themselves as a person. I would say approach it on like a person by person basis now, versus pre-COVID, it would have been like an event by event basis.
That makes sense. I had heard something yesterday morning that I thought was really, really interesting. And it actually was pertaining to like dating advice, but it really struck a chord with me. As somebody who's been married for 5 years, like singles advice really is helpful. But yeah, like it was this man was talking about how, like, if you're looking for people that enjoy a certain kind of thing, or people that have a certain kinds of interests and activities, like, and then you're going, like, let's say you're interested in camping, but you're going and trying to find people in the club, like, men, women, whatever floats your boat, but you're trying to find somebody in the club, that might not be the best solution. So One of the things that made me think of was like, okay, if you're trying to network and you want to meet people within your field, you can join professional organizations that even in COVID times, like, do have, situations where they encourage that networking with their, with their talent community. Power to Fly hosts them a lot as well. Things like our summits are a great place to go and meet people who are also interested in, growing their career. We have a community space, like I'll push that stuff later for y'all, but like, it's one of those things where, like, think about where you would go to get the information that you're trying to get, and then see if there's like, who else is there. Are you in a sea of people who are higher up, further along in their careers than you are? Excellent, great. Are you in a sea of people who are at your level or below? Excellent, because that way you can start making those connections, so that you might one day be that kind of like old wise man up on the mountain, ready to like dispense all of the fabulous advice to people that come to ask you. So I think that, it's something that might be helpful, take it with a grain of salt, because clearly I've been out of the game for a while, but, might be something that would be helpful to y'all. All right, let's talk about client relationships. Obviously in sales, these are incredibly key. Most of, having been raised by a salesman, I completely understand a lot of the core ones, right? Listen more than you talk, show, don't tell, that kind of thing. What are your suggestions when it comes to building a good relationship with clients?
I would say, so I would say figuring out where the win-win situation is. Like, how do I help you win? How I win? You know that I'm trying to win by closing this deal, but like, how can I help you win in your specific role? Or how can I make you look good to your bosses or your C-level execs or your board members? Or how can I make your company look good? That's another way, right? So that's finding the win-win ground is super important. I really like to also find like something personal about them. I try my best to find at least like 3 personal fun facts about any person that I meet, because then I associate that person with like, okay, like this CIO that I just met at the US Open, he has 3 kids, he likes biking, and he just got into golfing a year ago. These are all things that I can bring up in the future as like an opener, and be like, hey, have you hit the links yet? How are your 3 kids doing? I know that like they're really into buying sneakers online, which is funny and I guess fun. But things like that, where if you have like 3 personal fun facts in the back of your mind, it's so easy to like start a conversation with them. One thing that I learned from My old VP of sales, Alex Patman, is when we would have our one-on-ones, he would spend the first 25 minutes talking about personal things with me. And then he would spend the last 5 minutes like quickly shooting all of the serious business work questions at me. And it was hard, but it really pushed me to understand that the personal relationship makes it so much easier to ask the hard business questions really quickly. So that's how I manage my client relationships, is I try to make sure that we both win in any way possible and make sure I can get to know them as a person. At least 3 fun facts would be nice, but if the one fun fact is that we both have dogs, that's fine too. So yes, just finding things to talk about that are not work related is really nice. And then you hit them with the hard negotiation questions at the end. So.
I think that's wonderful. Now, just something that occurred to me while I was listening to you, it sounds like for by and large, a lot of good salesmanship or being a good salesperson is, kind of building those relationships. And so it sounds like, networking is not only something y'all do for your careers, but also like to excel in the role you're in, for your own performance and things. Do you find that salespeople are better at networking or worse at networking because of this kind of confluence?
The good sales reps are excellent at naturally networking.
I think the natural part, that's huge to highlight right there, right? Like anybody can network when they're like, hi, my name is Meg. I need to know these things and I can tell you these things.
Yes. Yes. Like if you are naturally having a conversation with someone, people buy from people that they like. So if you like the person you're talking to, you're more than likely to want to work with them again. I think that's really important to being in the cybersecurity / DevOps world. Everyone knows everyone, and everyone also likes to move jobs every so often. I think there was a statistic that came out in 2020 that the average tenure of any given engineer is around 2 years in tech. So it's really important to make sure that you're not just doing your job just to do your job. You're doing it to make the person in front of you look good or perform better at their job. I think that the networking piece, though, is definitely a natural thing. Just let it happen naturally. Don't force it. Don't pitch your product the first time you meet someone. Don't even pitch yourself the first time you meet someone, unless it's relevant to the topic or relevant to the person.
Yeah. Okay. So we had talked a little bit about, how building those relationships make it easier to have, difficult conversations with clients or make it easier to pivot into, into your sales angle. What are some best practices that you've used for navigating such difficult conversations with clients?
Great question, because as everybody probably saw, we had a security incident here at Okta. And I believe it was late February, early March or so. A huge investigation. We took it very seriously. For about 6 days straight, I only slept 4 hours a night because I was responding as fast as humanly possible to anyone and everyone, whether it was my current customer, my prospective customer, my teammates, my channel partners, my ISV partners, my previous coworkers who, I worked with at Rapid7, and that's kind of like our thing at Rapid7 is incident detection and response and full management. So it was a hard time as an individual. And then of course, as a company as well, we had to manage a lot of communications to our customers and prospective customers. So having those conversations around a security incident as a cybersecurity company was so hard. I had to be a punching bag for some of my clients. At the end of the day, I had to put my customer service hat on and be very understanding and field all of their questions and try to be as resourceful with the information that I had as much as possible. We actually launched a website that's called okta.com/transparency after that happened, because we were like, okay, the biggest piece of feedback that we got from that is that our customers and our prospective customers want transparency. They want to know what's going on in real time. And as a sales rep, I was just like answering text messages, calls, emails as like so fast. But that's a key example of this was a really hard conversation for me to have, but sometimes it's important to just put your customer service hat on and be communicative and honest and transparent, and just be a really good listener, but also be good at listening to the feedback and taking that feedback into action and doing with it what you can. So at large, I think the Okta sales team did a really good job of getting through that really hard time together as a team and then as a company as well. Again, the feedback that we got from people was Okta needs to be more transparent. We bubbled that up as much as we could to our leadership team, and they came out with a transparency page. So that's how I navigate really hard conversations, is being transparent, honest, communicative, and answering as quickly as I possibly can. So with the information that I have.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so let's talk about when the difficult conversation you're trying to have is with a potentially churning client. I've gotten to see small glimpses of this during my time at Power to Fly, because I'm in a client facing role. And so I do get to talk to the sales team or talk to the CSMs. What strategy or do you employ when you are faced with a potentially churning client? How can you change the situation potentially into making them happy clients again?
Yeah, I think I have about 4 ways that I manage this. So I do have a customer install base, and then I have a list of prospective customers as well. When it comes to the churn conversation, I would say not being defensive is really important. Letting them vent if they need to about specific open support cases or whatever their experience has been that makes them potentially want to churn. Give them reassurance that you're listening to them. Make sure you send that follow-up email of, here's what I heard, here are my action items that I'm going to try to do my best to follow up with you on. And then last but not least, like really working with them on the same side of the table to understand what would help bring them back to a happy place.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And, it's kind of like you said earlier, like putting on that kind of customer service hat. Personally, so I'm not in sales. I have never been in sales, but I was raised by a salesman. And so I know what those conversations look like when you are faced with somebody that's very unhappy about whatever's going on. And so like you had said, being able to listen and not just like listen, but really hear what the person is telling you, it's huge, right? A lot of the time, if somebody's not happy with something, most of what you need to do, most of the work is going to be just in listening and making them feel heard, right? You want to make sure that you have a good grasp of like what exactly is the issue, so that way you can do everything you can to fix it. But yeah, I think that's solid advice. If you if you've any of our talent community, y'all, if you have had a different experience with this or have a go-to move or response that you've used that works really well for you, let us know. Share it in the chat. And then just a flag for y'all, we have 20 minutes left in today's session. So if you have questions for Marcella, please throw them in the chat. We would love to get a chance to answer as many as we can. A lot of sales being in sales is about rejection, right? It's about understanding that you are going to get, a certain number of no's in contrast to every yes that you do get. How do you stay motivated when it comes to, kind of being in the face of a lot of client rejection?
Do you want like the super honest answer? Or do you want like the politically correct answer?
No, let's go with super honest, and then we'll go from there.
I'll give both answers. My first answer is I have very clear goals for myself, which include closing as much business as possible and making as much money as possible. So I think that I have such like clear goals and expectations for myself that no matter how many times people like punch me from all angles and say no to me, I'm so set on those goals that I'm like, you know what, it's fine. Like this person said no, but somebody else is going to say yes. Because in order for me to get to those goals, I need to find the people that will say yes. So that's the honest answer. The selfish answer is I want to hit these goals so badly that whatever comes my way, like I'll kind of push through it and deal with it. But the nicer, less selfish answer, I would say, is it kind of depends on why you're getting rejected, right? So if you're getting rejected because your messaging is wrong, or because you called them on a Monday morning and they're not in a good mood because it's Monday morning, or you're just reaching out to the wrong person. If it's something like that, if you can collect your rejections or objections and figure out what the gaps actually are, and if it's something that you can control, then you should do that. I do have a tracker, like a territory plan tracker, where I can state like whether I have made contact with specific net new accounts, and why they rejected me or why they said no. And then I'll go after somebody else in that account and be like, hey, I heard this objection, but it might not be an objection for you, or you might not care about the thing that this person cares about. And I'll try to tailor my message to a different person within that account. So I think it's important to really analyze like what the objections are, and how you can pivot, or maybe go ask someone else, hey, I got this objection, or hey, I'm getting rejected from like this specific industry. Is it maybe just not a good industry fit for Okta, or for whatever company you work for? So you can definitely analyze like why you're getting rejected sometimes, but if it's just purely poor timing, then okay, see you later. I'll hit you up in 3 months. I'm going to go talk to somebody else now.
Well, and that makes a ton of sense, right? Because, a lot of the time when you are in a sales role, it can feel very much like you are selling yourself, right? Because like you do have to have, you're trying to use things like your personality and your communication skills to sell this product to somebody. And so it can feel really personal, like really easily, because you are the one that's constantly interfacing, and you're the one that can change, what your messaging is, all that kind of stuff. But I think you're right. I think it is very important to know what's happening, kind of have an idea of like maybe your metrics. So that way, when it feels like you're getting a lot of rejections, you at least can stand back from that and take more of an objective look at it and say like, okay, am I really getting a lot of rejections? Or did I just get a lot of rejections this week that are kind of clouding the success that I had in the rest of this industry, or with this certain subset of like the prospects I'm looking at? So I think that's really good call out. Thank you for making that. How can you share with us a little bit about how you have strategically partnered with sales development teams to find success? Because these are two teams that work very, very, very closely, and in some cases might actually be like basically part of the same department. So what does this partnership look like as far as you've experienced it?
So I grew up through the SDR program once upon a time, many years ago, and it's a grind. You have to, as the account executive, you have to know that being an SDR is really hard. You get rejected a ton. And you kind of get beat up on the field sometimes, but it makes you a better account executive for sure. A lot of the things that I learned as an SDR, I've carried along with me as an account executive. So I truly respect any and all SDRs that are in the role right now, and including my own. I think that I have a tracker somewhere of like every SDR I've ever worked with and I've ever mentored, and all but one are now account executives. The one that's not an account executive yet is a team lead, and she's on her way. So I think that working with an SDR is super fun. But it goes back to understanding what success looks like for them. At certain companies, being an SDR, your quota is how many meetings you set. At other companies, it's how many opportunities closed. So it can vary. Their KPIs can vary. So really understanding what their quotas are and what it takes to get to that quota is really important. Another thing too is learning what your SDR is really good at, and learning what your SDR really likes, and seeing if you can kind of like cross those over for them. So if your SDR really likes getting paid, then maybe you can incentivize them with like whatever you're allowed to legally incentivize them with. If your SDR likes to co-run deals at the beginning until close, then let them hop on that train with you and let them like run in the or drive in the passenger seat with you, so that they have visibility, and be like, hey, if you get me more meetings and more opportunities, I'll involve you in this process until the very end. And some SDRs absolutely love that. So, I think that learning how they hit their quota and making sure that they get there with any help you can get, figuring out what they like to do, And marrying that with how they hit their quota is going to get them to their quota faster. And then meeting with them on a cadence that works for both of you, that's productive. I'm a huge fan of not meeting if we don't have to meet, but I'm also a huge fan of if somebody needs to meet once in the beginning and once at the end of the week, then I'm open to doing that as well. So really meeting the SDR where they're at in their career and in their development too, is that was my favorite part about being an SDR, was all of my AEs were like so good to me and they were good at doing both of those things. So, so remembering back to being an SDR and like just grinding, making like 65 dials a day, 30 cold emails a day. It's a hard job, but if you have AEs that treat you well and figure out what you like to do and make sure that you get to do those things, then it's a very fruitful relationship.
Okay, cool. Now I know you had shared that you're fairly new to the industry, or at least not decades into your career. Now, from knowing that you're coming from that perspective, do you have any recommendations for programs, resources that might be helpful to seasoned professionals who are returning after a career break? We've seen a lot of this. It's generally speaking, when we do talk about returnships, a lot of it is in terms of women coming back to the workforce after caregiving, anything that related. But we also have seen, because of COVID, a huge surge in the number of people who are maybe outside of that core demographic that tends to make up the returners. So what would you say to people that are either coming, kind of coming back after a pause or a break and trying to kind of get back up to speed when it comes to the sales world?
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that question, because when I started at Okta, one of the first women that I met that was in my role, we met on Zoom. She's in San Francisco. Her name is Sarah. She was like, yeah, so I took like a 6-year break from sales and I came back and Okta hired me as a field rep. So I'm kind of like, took me a little bit to get used to the new technology, because, after 6 years out of the tech industry, we have like Slack, Zoom, like whatever, all of these new things. And I asked her, I was like, what was it like coming back from that? And she said, well, first and foremost, I asked a lot of questions internally. So if you work at a company or you want to work at a company that has a bunch of like cool new tech, find a company where people are willing to help you and answer your questions, no matter what the questions may be. I had a teammate come in that has never used Salesforce before. He's only used Oracle before coming to Okta. And Salesforce, as you guys know, is like a behemoth of a tool, right? But he picked it up so quickly within like the first 2-3 weeks of being in the job, because he was asking all of us questions and we were more than happy to help him. So having the confidence to ask questions, no matter what questions they may be, is the number one tool for coming back to sales from wherever you're coming from, or even like coming up from I don't know, like a finance industry, something like that has old school systems. Just join a company that's really good at answering questions and giving you resources to learn about that. Now, if you are coming back or coming in from a different industry, I would say reading the public customer case studies is like the easiest way to learn how to understand what Okta, for example, is all about. Like when I was interviewing for Okta, I had a couple of friends that worked here, and I was like, how do I even learn what Okta does? And they were like, go to okta.com/customers, read as many customer case studies as you can, and you'll really learn what the real life use cases are of whatever company you're starting to work at. And you become a better sales rep for it too, because then you're learning and explain I'm 5 version of what this company does and how they benefit other companies and why you should sell it or how you can sell it. Customer case studies are the number one easiest way to come back or come into a new company and learn what we do.
I like that. Actually, that dovetails really nicely with a different question you were asked. This person said, I just started at a tech company and I'm having some difficulties understanding the product and speaking the correct language. Do you have any advice on how to get familiar with a new product or service that we're representing? And I think this is something that a lot of salespeople face, even if they're not going to a new org, right? Because there's always new products that are being thought up or being marketed. And so, what do you recommend to people who are, having a hard time, hitting the ground running? Or getting up to speed when it comes to this a new service or a new product?
Yeah, customer case studies. I think that's, I would say, like, talking to your customers, if you get a customer install base, like, meet your customers first and ask them like why they adopted Okta and what their use cases are. But some companies don't get customer install bases. They're just like net new prospects only accounts. Read the case studies for sure. And then the lingo is pretty funny too, because it's different at every company. There's a million different acronyms. Again, like going back to being comfortable with asking the questions, no matter what question they may be. People are happy to answer your questions and help you out. So
yeah. All right. So let's say that we're looking for resources to help sharpen our sales skills. Outside of, kind of just practice makes perfect sort of thing. What do are there any areas that you consider or any skills that you consider like critical to succeeding in the sales industry?
Sales tools wise, or like learning platforms specifically?
This said skills, so I'm guessing like more of an internal thing and less of a like you have to use Aperture or whatever.
Yeah. Yep. MedPick is great. So even though I sometimes get in trouble for not filling out MedPick in Salesforce all the time, knowing how to use MedPick as a tool and as almost like a guide or a structure for running your deals, running your conversations, really getting to know the deal itself, like that's going to carry you until not only the end of the deal, but also like sharing those MedPick notes post sale with like the deployment team, customer success team. It really outlines why this customer should and why they did buy anything. And MedPick has been, I learned MedPick at Datadog. We did not use it at Apple as much. At Apple, we used the 3 whys: why do anything, why now, why Apple. I think that's another important piece of the puzzle too. If you're going like 101, get the 3 whys. If you're going like 201, get MedPick. And if you don't know what MedPick is, if you just Google MEDPIC, you'll get a million different answers. But I would say, generally speaking, it's by far like the most useful tool in figuring out the details of your deal and running a successful conversation when you're speaking with your customers and prospects.
Okay, cool. All right, we have about 7 minutes left. I want to make sure we save a little bit of time to talk more about Okta before we bounce. But one question that I wanted to make sure we touched on, this person had asked about maintaining a work-life balance, especially when the sales industry is so competitive. So we had talked earlier about, when you all had a situation that you had to kind of pivot on and be in communication with your clients and with your prospective clients. What do you recommend, or what has worked for you to help maintain that work-life balance, especially when you are, you're in a competitive industry and you are driven to succeed?
Well, that's a tough question. I think that work-life balance is it's tough. It's really, really hard. As somebody that like loves their job, it's like really hard for me to unplug. And like that's not lost on me. And it's also not lost on my director and my VP. My director and my VP are very pro work-life balance, in the sense that like they know that this is an area of opportunity for me. Where they're like, you need to log off for like a couple days. So we're going to like force you to log off for a couple days. And I'm like, I can't, like, I'm busy. I have things to do. And they're like, no, you need to go. So having someone internally at Okta really like be able to guide you on like, hey, it's time for you to take a break, is helpful for me personally. Another piece of work-life balance too is, something that works for a lot of my friends is time blocking or calendar blocking. So they'll block off like an hour during the day, or an hour in the morning, hour in the evening, when it's like, okay, like get off your computer, go do something else. So time blocking is great. Having somebody to push you to take PTO is great. And then knowing when it's time to like celebrate a win is also really great. So sometimes, or like in the past, like I've had like, if a big deal comes in and I'm really proud of it, I'll be like, okay, like I'm going to give myself I'm going to log off at 4 and go get dinner by myself and like have oysters and a martini or something like that to like celebrate. So that strike of work-life balance is really hard, but having people that help me do that internally at Okta, and then also the time blocking is huge as well. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
No, absolutely.
It was a tough question. It's a tough question.
Yeah.
If you love your job, it's like, ooh, like.
Yeah. Well, and I think that what you said about the time blocking, especially, like a lot of the questions that we got around this seemed to stem from the remote work environment, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I was lucky enough to get to transition into remote work prior to the pandemic. I've been doing it for about a year before the kind of quarantine and lockdown and all that stuff started hitting, at least in America. And so I had a very different experience than a lot of my friends or than my husband, people that then had to kind of pivot. And so I know from experience that it can be very hard to turn off, right? Especially when you are in something that's as competitive as sales and your office is like right there. It might not even be down the hall. It might be literally like 2 steps from your kitchen table and that's your office. Exactly. So it can be really hard to do, like to really shut off. But I think you're right. Having that time blocking, even if like I used to have a boxing class that started every afternoon at 5:45. So without fail, no matter what, I went to the class. And that way I knew like, okay, I was doing something for myself. I was taking a good break. But if something, if a fire came up and I needed to handle it, then fine. But like, if it was not like a 3-alarm fire, I didn't skip. I went to class and then I would come back if I needed to and get, like kind of get back up to speed on what it was happening or, work an extra hour or something. But like having that time block, like forced me to like respect the stuff that I actually do need to be good at what I do.
And
I
a
love
little plug for Okta here. They're so nice about PTO and like taking time off. It's really nice. So
excellent. Oh, I mean, I can't recommend strongly enough, like work at a place that really values your mental, your mental health and your well-being. Like as much as you are able to do that, that is hugely key. All right, we have about 3 minutes left, and I want to make sure we talk a little bit more about Okta. So we, in front of y'all, let's go to slideshow. There we go. In front of y'all are some questions that we had asked Marcella prior to today's session. So one of the things we asked you is if you could describe Okta's culture in one word. Obviously, this is 2, but I think this is fabulous. What do you mean when you say collaborative winning?
Whenever I ask anyone a question in whatever business unit they're in or team they're on, they always answer and they always help out, because at the end of the day, we know that we all want to make our customers happy and successful, and individually too.
Of course, yeah. All right, let's talk about your favorite part about working at Okta. I think that one of the things was the resources sounds absolutely amazing, but let's talk about kind of that autonomy that Okta really provides you with.
Our leadership team is very trusting that we're going to do the right thing at the right time. I have never felt micromanaged at this company, and it's been like a year and a half, I think. And as a sales rep that's remote, it's very easy for management to be micromanagey, if that's a word. But they trust us. Like they hired us to do the job. And if we do the job, then they're going to be like, okay, great. Sounds good. Like, tell me what you need. And another thing too, that I forgot to put here is they're very good at removing blockers for us. Like my VP always says, like my whole job here is to remove blockers in order for you to do your job well and to be happy at Okta. And so I really appreciate that. And I enjoy it here.
Great. All right. Before we run out of time, I want to talk about your top tips for someone who's interviewing. One of the things you talk about is know how to tell your story and find out how to marry it with the company. So can you share with us maybe how you did this at Okta?
Yeah. So Apple, end user IT, Datadog, DevOps, Rapid7, security, SecOps, and Okta does all of those things. So it's pretty easy for me to be like, hey, like I've worked with a bunch of IT and engineering teams for so many different projects. When I interviewed at Okta, I was like, it just makes sense. Like it makes sense. Like my previous background makes sense. But then for other people, it's like, oh, like I had 12 years in the finance industry, but I want to get into tech sales because I believe in the innovation. I believe that tech is the future. Like, if you can make whatever your background is make sense with the company that you're interviewing with, like, the company will hear you and be like, we can see you as one of our people. So that's how I did it. I was just like, hey, I've done like IT DevSecOps for the past like 6 years. Like, I want to keep doing this. And I think Okta works with all of those teams from like a clientele base. And it was true. Like, I work with IT security developers, like, and end users as well sometimes. So it just make it make sense. Make your story make sense for what you want to do in the future and what you've done in the past.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Okay, that's going to bring us to the end of our time today. It always goes incredibly quickly, but Marcella, I just want to say a huge thank you to you for taking time out of your day to spend with us, bring us your expertise, share, be so transparent with us. Thank you so much. It's been really wonderful to get to know you for the last hour.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And if anybody on the line wants to connect on LinkedIn, more than happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, for that, being open for that. That's really great. All right, that's going to bring us to the end of our session. So we have a lot more great programming coming up for you in the next week. If this has been your first Power to Fly event, we hope that you loved it. I cannot wait. Hope so much that we'll see you on future chats or future events with us going forward. If you are part of our frequent flyers and we see you all the time, thank you so much for coming. Y'all are always, I love seeing familiar faces. So I hope that y'all will have a wonderful rest of your Monday, and we'll